if you find yourself naturally drawn to the timeless look and feel of aluminum luggage, but you simply can't fathom spending a ridiculous amount of money on one, this Gibraltar aluminum carry-on from Level 8 at about a quarter of the price of a Rimowa original cabin, their carry-on, I think is a really good option for anyone that's looking for a more accessibly priced aluminum suitcase that is still well made. I'd say about 60% of what you get in a Rimowa, but also something that's maybe more understated and it's not going to be drawing as much attention, so you can feel more comfortable when you're traveling in new places. On this video, I'm going to point out my favorite things about it, some nitpicks that I have with it, walk you through it, pack it out, and then ultimately share some thoughts. I'll also compare it to the MVST, the Treva. I'm going to be doing a more dedicated video comparing these two, but I imagine if you're looking for a more budget-friendly aluminum suitcase, chances are you've narrowed it down to these two and maybe a few others. So let's get into it. So really my favorite things about it are the cost to value. Secondly are the handles, all of them, both the grab handles and the telescoping handle. And then lastly, compared to a lot of other aluminum suitcases, I find that it has a more understated look. So in terms of the cost, this retails for $459. At pretty much any given time, you'll get like 10 to 15% off just to opt into their email program. Also throw a discount code below if you do decide you want to snag one and you want to support the channel. Always appreciated. But it ends up being in the low 400s, which in and of itself is expensive for a carry-on suitcase, where you can get polycarbonate suitcases for $200–300 that are really, really well made. But the $400 price point represents kind of that entry point into aluminum suitcases. You have this, you have MVST, their Treva, and then they have a few others. And then beyond that, you have like Quince that does a lot of different things beyond suitcases. So for that reason alone, I just rule them out. And then there's Noble, which I have no experience with, but I tread lightly. I've read enough horror stories about their quality control and customer service being practically non-existent that I'd nudge you away gently. But then beyond that, you've got the Away one is in the $600 range, the Monos one is $700. And then pretty quickly, you know, you jump into Carl Friedrich, Toomey, Halliburton in the $1,000 to $1,300 range. And then Rimowa, and then Sterling Pacific, where you're like $1,500 to $2,000. And while of course there's gonna be certain compromises when you're spending $400 versus $1,500 on a suitcase, but you're really entering the world of diminishing returns. And look, if you have a lot of money and you love the look of a Rimowa or the Toomey 19 degree and you travel a lot, absolutely go for it. They're objectively nicer suitcases, the liner fabric, the proprietary wheels on the Rimowa. You get aluminum latches as well as grab handles. The liner fabric just feels more refined, more premium. Here, instead of a pure anodized aluminum, you get an aluminum magnesium blend, which is also what MVST does. You don't get micro adjustments on the telescopic handle. The liner fabric isn't anything super sexy, but it's solid. I think all in all, in the $400 range for an aluminum suitcase, it does not feel cheap by any means. And all in all, I prefer it a bit over the MVST for reasons that I'll get into later. And then a nice little value add also is that you get 4 packing cubes. You get a big one that fits on one side of the suitcase. And then beyond that, you get a few other little ones. One is more specific to toiletries, and it comes with these like Velcro dividers so you can organize your stuff. A little bit of organization. They're nicely padded. They don't have any like compressibility, so it's just the one zipper. And then you get these like Velcro patches on there, so depending on what you throw in there, you can put one specific to shoes or clothes, laundry, etc. And then beyond that, you get a nice little leather luggage tag. Second thing that I really like about this are the handles. So the grab handles themselves have a slow release mechanisms. On the Rimowa, for example, it is not as slow release as this. It's like a bit more aggressive than this. And while the grab handles are plastic, they still feel nice to the touch. And then the telescopic handle, I really like that the push button is on the top part, not on the bottom part. And it has a very acceptable amount of wiggle. And it's just like really comfortable as you're carrying around. If you think about like when you're interacting with your suitcase, the main place where you're interacting with it as you're rolling it around is up here. And to me, it's really important having a suitcase that doesn't have a ton of wobble, feels stable and sturdy, has like a comfortable grip, and then the push button just being on the top, to me is like more intuitive than when it's on the bottom. And also sometimes like the push button on the bottom isn't recessed, it like protrudes out and it just doesn't feel as nice on the old hands. The last thing that I really like about this is that even though it is an aluminum suitcase, which in and of itself is gonna draw more attention than a standard polycarbonate or soft shell, ballistic nylon, any other type of suitcase. And one of the reasons why all in all I still prefer this over the Treva is that it doesn't have all the grooves. Like, don't get me wrong, like the Rimowa is an insanely beautiful suitcase. It's kind of like the Rolex Submariner of the suitcase world, that even people that don't know anything about watches, they see one and they're like, yep, that's that Rimowa, that really expensive suitcase that celebrities are rocking everywhere. And so I do like that this one is more quietly luxurious. It's tasteful without screaming so much for attention. Whereas the Treva, I think like the combination of the really sharp lines, the grooves, the carbon fiber-esque textured look, this one's a little more thirsty for attention. And it's a really cool looking suitcase as well, but just in a more aggressive way. And this is more my vibe. As far as my nitpicks go, they are snap buttons on the dividers, which I'll talk about now, the fact that the wheels are fully gray, and then the lack of compression, which is something that candidly I typically don't care too much about, but given the nature of aluminum luggage, I think having compression is a nice value add. So starting off with the snap buttons on the dividers. These dividers here can be easily removed with snap buttons, which is nice. With that being said, because these dividers is what keeps clothing segmented and separated from both sides, I can't really imagine a situation where I wouldn't want these dividers. And what I found is that the snap buttons themselves, they're secure, but they also unsnap like a little too easily. And so what I found is you just have to be like more strategic when you're packing and unpacking. Like even right now, just oftentimes these things just unsnap. And so I've seen where it's just stitched on, where it's zipped on. While in theory, snap buttons work, I think for anyone especially that overpacks, something to be wary of, that these things can unsnap on their own. Next is the fact that the wheels are fully gray. Like typically you'll see wheels of all different colors, but the outside of the wheel is still gonna be black. I mean, there's a reason why tires on cars are also black, but they just show the dirt and grime a lot more when they're gray on the outside compared to black. Don't get me wrong, when it was completely new, it looked pretty sexy, but yeah, given the choice, I would have just still preferred black on the outside. I mean, it's not a deal breaker by any means, but worth calling out. And then lastly, the lack of compression. You have these little latches that have a stretchy webbing that clips on here, but this is really offering no compression. It's purely to create segmentation for the divider panels. And given the fact that with aluminum luggage, you're dealing with buckles, right? Not zippers. So it's either gonna close or it's not gonna close. And also it's a material that is not malleable at all. So for anyone that's like overpacking, you're pretty much like restricted to the very specific amount of space that you have in here. With polycarbonate, you get a little bit more give. And so yeah, I think it would have been nice to at least offer compression straps in here that you can remove if you're not going to end up using them. All right, so external walkthrough. You have plastic grab handles. They did a really great job of the slow release, as well as the one here on the side. You have this grab handle. I like that the push button is on the top. That's my preference. Also, when you're holding it, you don't have like a button protruding out like you do in some other ones, but And then you have 4 adjustments. That's as high as it goes. You got 1, 2, 3 more. But you got riveted design. The whole entire shell is flat. There's no grooves, and so in some ways I find that it just looks more minimal, more simple, draws less attention, but on the same token, because it is flat, it'll likely show scratches, indents more easily. On the back part, you get aluminum hinges, and you get 3 of them. There's that rubber weather sealing gusset that runs around it. Really smooth wheels. Now you can swap out the wheels, but they're not as easy. You just need to open up the liner and unscrew a few screws. But if one of them breaks, it is nice that you can swap it out yourself without having to rely on someone else. And then beyond that, you've got the dual lock. As you can see, you have this plastic little legs so that you can place it flat, which I really appreciate. The buckles, one thing that I really like is a lot of the times the recessing here have it more protected, so it's on the flip side. Something to keep in mind that because they bulge out a little bit, they might be a little bit more prone to damage, but it's really easy to buckle and unbuckle without feeling like you're gonna have to like nail your finger like you do in some other suitcases. These buckles though, keep in mind that they look aluminum, but they're actually plastic, which ideally would like them in aluminum, but like that's where you start having to pay a premium. Even if you look at the Away one that's in the $600 range, the Monos, which is in the $700 range, those are still using plastic buckles. Beyond the weight reduction, the die cast for an aluminum buckle is gonna cost significantly more, and that's part of what you're paying for in a more premium aluminum luggage. But for something that's like in the $400 range, I am not gonna complain about it whatsoever. Let's do a little pack out action. This is me taking clothes for a cold weather trip as if I was going somewhere. Really doesn't make a difference if it's 1 week or 3 weeks. I would still take about a week's worth of clothing and just do laundry while I'm out there. So as you can see here, you have these 2 like segmentation panels that are just snap on or snap off, but ideally you're gonna wanna leave them on to prevent clothing from moving around. And then organization wise, the only thing you have is this zippered pocket here. And then you have these little plastic latch mechanisms with a little bit of stretch mesh. Honestly, as far as vulnerabilities, this is the one area that doesn't inspire as much confidence, as this stretchy webbing just doesn't feel super thick and heavy duty. But I do like that you can just kind of like roll this out of the way. So I'll put an extra pair of pants, a like shirt, jacket, overshirt, a synthetic down hoodie, cotton sweater, and I've just got like 8 pairs of socks in here. I mean, ideally, as far as like maximizing space, probably just tuck the socks in between the grooves, and you can do that as well, but I'll just put it in there. Now, as I mentioned in the nitpicks, if you overpack when you're doing this, these snap buttons come like unsnap a little easier than I would like. So you might find yourself just having to snap them back into place. Cool. And then here I've got 7 t-shirts. In here I've got shorts, long sleeve shirt, a couple of things, and then I really like this Peak Design like ultra light stretch mesh. Got an extra pair of shoes there, and this is like really compressible. It's lightweight, doesn't take up a lot of space, and yeah, got my shoes in there. That's it. Could have definitely packed more, but yeah, I think it's a solid size. Final thoughts, I mean, look, aluminum luggage, it's kind of like the leather jackets of suitcases. You don't buy them because they're the practical option. They're heavier, they're more expensive, they dent and scratch a lot more easily, and they're not malleable. I'd say the main functional advantages are that you have a zipperless design, which is usually one of the biggest failure points in suitcases, and aluminum's gonna protect your stuff a lot better, which it really comes down to what you carry, but for me, clothing is usually what I have in here, and I really couldn't care less if it's polycarbonate, aluminum, or cloth to keep my things protected. You buy them because of the look, the personality. You have to be the kind of person that's gonna embrace all of the patina, the scratching, the denting. I think it's really hilarious when people are like, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on an aluminum suitcase. I've seen pictures of $2,000 Rimowa suitcases that had to get checked in. They were brand spanking new, and they look like they were dropped from the top of a skyscraper. I personally would never own a checked version of aluminum luggage for that reason, because I can appreciate little dents and scratches, that's totally fine, but luggage handlers, a lot of them seem like angry human beings that intentionally choose that job just to take out their anger on friggin' suitcases. So this checks off a lot of boxes. It's not so expensive where you're gonna be freaking out about babying it. It has an understated look, so despite the fact that it is aluminum, it's not gonna be drawing too much attention. I really like the soft release handles, the latches, the telescoping handle on it, the wheels, even though they're not Hinomoto's. Honestly, they feel just as smooth, maybe like slightly louder, but I was really impressed by the smoothness of these wheels. Not like a lot of like major nitpicks, like the snapping of the dividers, the lack of compression I think is the main one, and then the wheels just being gray. Compared to the MVST, a few reasons why all in all, I like it more. I think where the MVST definitely wins is just the inside. You get a little bit more organization, which to me, I don't really care too much about, but the liner fabric does feel a little bit nicer. You have compression, but on the outside, yeah, really it just comes down to the look, which is very subjective. The Treva to me just feels like a little bit too much like the Rimowa original cabin, whereas this one is like, hey, I'm aluminum, but I'm like doing my own thing. And then beyond that, the like subtle carbon fiber, like textured look, both looks nice, but at the same time, like it's just like a more aggressive, attention thirsty suitcase. I think probably most people are gonna like the look of this one more, but I prefer the look of this one. Beyond that, a few other things that edge it for me. The latches here are like more recessed in, which protects them. There's a functional advantage there, but they're like more aggressive and it's like harder to get your fingers in there, whereas these just protrude out more. And yeah, I just enjoy these latches more. Also the grab handle, the telescoping handle, with the build quality, it just feels a little bit more solid on the Level 8. And also the button is on the bottom for the MVST, which I prefer on the top. And also it just like protrudes out. So when you're like rolling around with it, you just feel like the button there. I'm crazy, but it's the little things that edge one more than the other for me. I'll be doing a more dedicated comparison of these two in a month or two. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, best of luck and cheers.